Thank you. I wrote this one out, so I want to be careful. If you don't have the answer, I understand, but I would be interested if you do. Can you provide specific examples of practices or techniques used in conversion therapy that are not based on the assumption that being LGBTQ is a mental disorder and that do not involve attempts to change or suppress one's sexual orientation or gender identity?
May I respond?
Whoever wants to take the answer, go ahead.
I think the whole problem is that those of us who are arguing in opposition of this bill don't actually believe that there is this quote unquote conversion therapy problem with regard to how we wish to be able to address gender questioning people. So the problem is that some people earlier today had the gall to link exploratory therapy in with conversion therapy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the Wikipedia page for conversion therapy, you will read some horrific things that happened in the 20th century. So, for example, aversion therapy, it's not really therapy, but they used tactics such as forcing gay men to watch porn while simultaneously receiving electroshock treatments and taking nausea-inducing drugs. Okay, this is what we mean by abusive. Also on the conversion therapy list, you'll see Nazi human experimentation, and you'll see some very bizarre and unscientific approaches, such as a therapist that had a patient lay in his lap and hit a pillow with a tennis racket. Okay, these are not the things that we're actually contesting. I am not defending conversion therapy. What I'm arguing against is that this bill is very confusing, and it links the practice of exploring and asking questions with attempting to convert. So my point is that, you know, and I've read some emails that you've sent people, Rep. Nose, and I understand where you're coming from, and I'm actually really glad to be having. I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you, because I don't think it was ever your intention to prevent therapists from doing their jobs. I think, you know, if you think about a case of an adolescent who, you know, 3 months ago started saying I'm trans, right when all their friends did, and if you look at how much time they've been spending on TikTok and some of the messages that they were receiving around gender, would you say that every kid who ever does that should be on medication for the rest of their life and should have life-altering consequences because of a phase they went through when they were 15? I got a tattoo when I was 16 illegally, and that was painful enough to have removed in my 20s. I can hardly imagine what it's like to have to live your entire life with the results of a phase that you went through as a teenager when you were looking for a way to fit in or a way to explain your problems. So we just want to be able to do our job as therapists, which is to ask questions and explore the root causes. You know, as Camille has said, there was a link in her story between sexual trauma and the discomfort with her female body parts. For many people, it does have to do with homosexuality. And I've seen this of people who are uncomfortable with the fact that they're gay and they'd rather be trans because somehow that feels safer to them. We also know that there's a very high comorbidity rate with autism, with eating disorders, depression, anxiety, OCD, and that people who were adopted or in foster care, in other words, who have deep attachment trauma, are highly overrepresented in this population of trans-identifying youth. So we just want to be able to do our job as therapists, which is to do a comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment that takes the individual's entire history and environment and well-being into account, that also takes into account their developmental history and developmental trajectory and what we know about developmental psychology. And we want to be able to practice the basic tenets of person-centered therapy, which include, do you need me to wrap it up?
Because I got other questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's okay. You're doing fine.
Let me just say that person-centered therapy requires that we be congruent, meaning that we're genuine with our clients. And if I can't tell my client, honestly, I see that you're a girl who really wants to be a boy. If I have to say, oh, yes, you are a boy, that's called affirmation therapy, then that erodes the foundation of trust and genuineness in the clinical relationship.
Okay. Do you have any follow-up to that?
No.
Okay. Representative Deal.
Thank you all for your testimony. Do you think there's a way to change Oregon law that would protect patients from harmful and unethical care and also allow thorough ethical care with clear guidance to therapists?
Whoever wants to answer.
Okay. Yeah, so I would be happy if the language around gender identity were simply removed, because the problem with this bill is that it links together sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, sexual orientation is pretty stable across the lifespan. The fact that people have gone to such extremes to try to abuse it out of people is just proof of how stubborn it really is and why it should be accepted. It also doesn't require society to change, or it doesn't require medical interventions. But gender identity is a highly fluid, novel concept that there's no biological evidence for the existence of gender identity. And even the trans rights activists themselves cannot tell you whether it's something that's fixed or fluid. That's not something that there's agreement about in any community. So why should we medicalize? Why should we have just one path we push people down early in life? If we could just remove the part around gender identity, I'd be happy. I'd also be happy if there were more specific protections for therapists being able, as I said, to ask questions, because I don't think it was ever your intention to put these parents in this situation that I've seen where they can't find any therapists who are willing to ask questions. So I would be happy to work with you on some more protections for exploratory therapy.
Okay.
Could I say something?
And
Yeah.
then I'm gonna try to get some folks up from the audience who want to testify.
Sure. So I guess the only other thing I would say is that, I guess specify blatant physical and emotional abuse, because we can all agree on that, and that's wrong. Because I have to live with this for the rest of my life. So it's, and I can't fit a dress the same way again. I can't breastfeed. I just don't want this to happen to somebody else. So, and I was an adult when I transitioned, so this bill would have impacted me, or it would impact somebody like me as well.